of government, a political regime. Okay, democracy might have started in the West. It has to start somewhere. But does that make it Western? Democracy works in the West, okay, we know that. But it works in Japan, it works in South Korea, it works in India, it even works in Israel. These are not Western countries. Certainly culturally, they're not Western. So you know what I think? I think these Western experts who think that democracy can never work in the Middle East, it only works with us Westerners because we're civilized. These guys are a bit racist. Because I think all human beings crave freedom and crave democracy and crave identity. And I think all human beings deserve freedom and identity. And if people like Mr. Green here think otherwise, they're entitled to think otherwise. But I don't think they should be ambassadors of a democratic country. Because what is the message that somebody like that sends to these people who want freedom and want identity in the Middle East? What is the message? You know, I go to the European Union website and I see the Middle East peace process. Wonderful, because there are so many conflicts in the Middle East. But as I read through the page, I understand that they don't want to solve all the conflicts in the Middle East. They're only talking about one conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict. And I'm thinking, why? Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. See, this guy here is also an ambassador, was also an ambassador. He was changed in the meantime. But he was the ambassador of Denmark to Israel. And while he was the ambassador, he was invited to a television show in Israel and asked, among other things, they asked him this question: does the European Union apply double standards in dealing with Israel? And that's what he answered.
Well, thank you very much. I am a little bit concerned about the Europe bashing, I must say. There is the allegation that Europe is applying double standards, discriminating. There was the issue of the proportionality of the civilian casualties in the Gaza conflict. Let me make this point. I think Israel should insist that we discriminate you, that we apply double standards. This is because you are one of us. We are not looking to Israel, and sometimes the response on the part of some Israeli interlocutors is, look what's going on in Syria, look what's going on elsewhere. Those are not the standards that you are being judged by. It's not the standards that Israel would want to be judged by. So I think you have the right to insist that we apply double standards and put you to the same standards as all the rest of the countries in the European context.
Okay, so what did His Excellency the Ambassador of Denmark tell us? Did he deny that the European Union applies double standards? Did he deny that it discriminates against Israel? He didn't deny, did he? He said, no, we do discriminate, but it's a good thing. Why? Because you're one of us. So it looks to me like in the mind of this ambassador, like in the mind of the previous ambassador, people are not quite the same. You know, there's people who are like us, and people who are not like us, you know, not quite that civilized, kind of primitive. You know, we can't compare you Israelis with these Syrians. You know, we demand more of you. And ultimately, why do they demand more from Israelis? Why are Israelis so different from Syrians? Because in the mind of this ambassador, like in the mind of the previous ambassador, Israelis are the white people. And, you know, these Arabs are the brown people. What can we ask of them, you know? And if you think I'm inventing this, let me show you something else. So this is just going to. This is a well-known anti-Israel activist, and he's been asked this question. He's been trying to justify why Palestinians are justified in promoting terrorism even against Israeli civilians. And this is what he says.
Okay? But you cannot take it out of context. You cannot live the life of a privileged white person, separate from a colonizer, in a country, take away their rights, deny them the right of their land and their freedom and their life, and expect to sit around with.
So I'm sorry about the quality of the soundtrack here, because it's a recording from a live debate. But basically, what I don't understand is why, in the mind of his activists, Israeli Jews are privileged white persons. I mean, I'm Israeli, I feel privileged for being Israeli, but what does skin color has to do with anything? What does it have to do with anything? Why did he introduce this white privileged person here? You know, these two, are Jews actually white people? Certainly, I mean, the Nazis didn't consider us white people, as the Ku Klux Klan doesn't consider us white people. These two gentlemen one of them was a Palestinian Arab. I'm saying was because they're both deceased. And the other was an Israeli Jew. Who's who? Can you tell me? They look the same to me. Actually, this guy is a famous Palestinian personality. He was a minister in some Jordanian governments, and he's the father of a famous PLO activist. And this man was my father, Allah Bashir. Now, my father was very dark-skinned. I take after my mom. But he was very dark-skinned. He was darker than practically any Arab that I've seen in Israel. Okay? This young woman is a well-known Palestinian activist. This young woman is a Jewish Israeli soldier. Who's the white person and who's the brown person? Actually, Jews, as we know, come in all colors, all skin colors, and actually so do Palestinians. So I don't understand why skin color has any role to play here. And I think that anyone who introduces that kind of terminology, you know, somewhere in the depth in the recesses of his or her mind, there's a bit of racism there. Okay? Now, the Middle East peace process. The Arab-Israeli conflict is not the only conflict in the Middle East. It's one of the many conflicts in the Middle East. And it's extremely naive that you can solve any of those conflicts, including the Israeli-Arab conflict, which is part of the many conflicts in the Middle East, without resolving the fundamental issues in the Middle East, which are the deficit of freedom and the confused identities, confused national identities. It's impossible. Now, to those like that ambassador who will tell me, well, it will never work, and you know, or if it works, it will take centuries, and so on. To those people, I say, no. I believe that the world can change. In fact, I know that the world can change. How do I know? Because it has changed in my lifetime. I've seen it changing. You see, I'm going to show you this picture again. I was born somewhere here in one of these Eastern European countries that was a communist country. It was part of the communist empire, if you wish. Okay, this pink area here. And there was somebody called it, Winston Churchill called it an iron curtain. There was an iron curtain between this area and the West, or the democracies, right? And the Soviet Union was tremendously powerful. When I was a young man, it had a huge influence on my life and on the life of hundreds of millions of people, maybe billions of people. And all of a sudden, the country that I was born in, that was part of this communist empire, now is part of the European Union. It's a democratic country. And that happened not in centuries, not in decades, in a few short years, in the 1990s. It all came apart and reformed, and the world changed. And you know what? We had experts. We called them Sovietologs. Those of you who are my age and more remember the term Sovietologs. We had experts who specialized in studying the Soviet Union. Not one of them predicted this. Just like these experts today say that there can never be democracy in the Middle East. I believe the world can change. And I think it is changing already. I think we see the beginnings of that change. And just like we didn't recognize the beginnings of the change in Eastern Europe, we don't recognize the beginnings here. But there will be change. There will be change because people are people and they crave freedom and identity everywhere, including in the Middle East. So, just to summarize, my answer is actually yes. What I said in the beginning was a joke. Yes, I think there will be a peaceful solution, ultimately. I don't think it will come from more of the same, trying to impose a solution, doing another conference, a peace conference, and so on and so forth, without changing the fundamentals. You've got to change the fundamentals. The conflict can end only through a fundamental change in one of the sides to the conflict. Okay? And if you ask me why that side has to be the Arab side and not the Israeli side, the reason is that that side has the problem, the deficit of freedom and the deficit of identity. And now it's for real, and it's not a joke anymore. I finished. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm going to take questions if there are any questions. But before I do that, let me do a plug. If you like this session, my next session is tomorrow morning at 8:30. It's obviously I'm not going to be able to use slides, but it's going to be a kind of discussion on the issue of migration. Okay, I'm sure it's an issue that is pertinent in North America just as it is in Europe or more. And then tomorrow afternoon we're going to have a discussion about who are the Palestinians and what do they want? What do they really? Who are they really? And what do they really want? Okay, thank you very much for your.
I do have a question. It bothers me a lot when everything is blamed on the Arabs and the Palestinians and everything, and then I listen to Netanyahu saying that the Arabs are in a lower position than the Jews in Israel, because this is against what you're just saying. So I don't know if you're talking about that, if you have a position on that.
Well, my position, I think, is clear. I'm not representing Benjamin Netanyahu. By the way, I don't think he actually said that the Arabs are somehow lower or more primitive or something like that.
They are second-class citizens. That's what he said.
No, he didn't say that.
No?
No, he didn't say that. Absolutely not.
Well, that's
Absolutely
what came
not.
out in other conferences.
Absolutely not. He never pronounced the words second-class citizens, and if he did pronounce those words, I think there would have been a revolution. But what has been said, that some of the things that he said can be interpreted as making Arabs second-class citizens. For instance, he did say that Israel, from the point of view of national character, not from the point of view of equality under the law. That is clear. All Israeli citizens are equal under the law, under the Israeli law. But from the point of view of the character of the state, the character is Jewish and not Arab. Just like, I don't know, there is a Pakistani minority in the UK, but the character of Britain, of Great Britain, as Britain is a Christian country, the Queen is the head of the Church of England and the head of the state. Okay, so in that now none of us knows what Mr. Netanyahu actually thinks, obviously, and I'm not here to represent or defend him or anything like that. My personal opinion, as I've expressed it here, is that, Arabs, like Jews, like Brits, like French people, like everybody else, basically want the same things. They want freedom and they want identity. Okay? That's the most basic things that everybody wants. We have to say, and we shouldn't be politically correct, we have to say that from the point of view of political development, Arabs today, unfortunately, are on a lower level of political development compared with European states or compared with Israel. Okay? That's not necessary. First of all, that's not a cultural characteristic. That's not a biological characteristic. That is a result of history. Okay? Just like, somebody who grows up in a poor family might sometimes, be a little bit left behind compared to somebody who comes from a well-to-do family. It's not his fault or her fault. Okay? It's the result of circumstances. In this case, historical circumstances. The reason the Arab world is at this lower level of political development, not cultural development, not biological development, political development, the reason for that is the dominance of the Ottoman Empire, that, this was the backyard of the Ottoman Empire that they neglected and oppressed and kept down. And the European colonialists continue to do exactly that. So, we had this situation that these people have been kept down and oppressed until not so long ago. And once the colonialists went away, they left behind local rulers who continue to do the same, continue to oppress, continue to neglect education and neglect human development and everything. And that's not something that we can deny. If you look at the UN publishes a Human Development Index, you look at that index, and in most Arab countries, it's low. That's not because they're less capable, that's because they are poorly led. From a government point of view. Any other question? I hope I answered.
Yes.
Yes.
So you mentioned that one of the reasons why there's a deficit of democracy in the Middle East is because the borders are so terribly drawn in relation to identity. And maybe in Europe, one reason why democracy is so successful is the borders are more sensibly drawn. More so. So maybe you could say something. Could you say something about how the Middle East might overcome its border problem and how democracy might still emerge this kind?
I think to a certain extent, unfortunately, this is happening. It has happened in Europe to a large extent, historically, through war and suffering. And unfortunately, it's happening in the Middle East also through war and suffering. If you look at Syria today, it's a different country compared with what Syria used to be, okay? In the sense that the communities, the various ethnic and faith community and linguistic communities have separated much more than they used to be. And through foreign intervention, the conflict now is, let me say, on a lower level. But at its peak, it was one of the possible outcomes of this conflict may be secession of various parts of Syria as independent states. And we know very well one of the reasons that there is this Turkish invasion of Syria is because the Kurdish areas of Syria have kind of separated from the rest. Actually, they're self-ruled already, or they were self-ruled, and they tended towards kind of autonomy, if not independence. Now, it's not happening only with the Kurds. The Alawites, that, you know, the kind of skeleton, the basis of the regime of Mr. Assad, have a stronghold around Latakia in the northwest of Syria on the coast, on the Mediterranean coast. And that area is now much more homogeneous from the point of view of population than it used to be. The same happens in Yemen. Unfortunately, all that happens rather than happening through, in a collaborative way, through negotiation and understandings and so on. It happens through war. Okay, why does it happen through war? Because of the second thing, the lack of freedom. Because they have unrepresentative governments that fear their own peoples and try to react to any kind of assertion of identity, of a separate identity, by oppression. That's how they react to it. And that causes conflict, further conflict, and that eventually causes war. The European country, you're right, Leon, in saying that the borders in Europe are more reasonable in terms of, representing the identities. Somewhat more reasonable. But they were not always like that. They developed like that, and often they developed in a very traumatic way like that. And by the way, even in Europe, where you have issues of identity versus borders, you have conflicts. There might be a different kind of conflicts. People don't kill each other necessarily, but there are look at Catalonia, look at Scotland, look at Belgium. Okay? You know what? Look at Yugoslavia. Former Yugoslavia, I have to say. Okay? We had this issue of borders that didn't quite didn't quite coincide with identities, and so we had conflict. And so now they separated in independent states, and we don't have conflict anymore. Now they live peacefully. Okay. Did I answer?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
So what's your opinion, one state versus two state, with this new identity and happy Arabs? What are they going to choose?
I don't know is the short answer. And the other answer I'm going to say, it's not for me to say. It's for them to decide. And you know what? The reason I don't know, I can't know, because I don't think they know yet. Because I think these kind of decisions, are not taken in antiquity or some sort of carried over. They are made at some point in history. That, people reach those decisions gradually. And I don't think the Arab peoples or the Arab nation depends how you want to look at it. I don't think they made this decision. I don't think they were able to make this decision because of the way they are oppressed. They are governed poorly. They are kept with insufficient education and with more urgent problems like how to feed your children tomorrow. Okay, you think less about self-determination and independence when you have to think about what you feed your children with tomorrow morning. So I don't think that. But if you look historically at the movements that actually had support, popular support in the Arab world, there were two movements historically that had popular support in the Arab world. One was the so-called Pan-Arab movement. That was a movement to unify all Arab countries into one state based on a common language, sort of, and a common sort of ethnicity and common traditions and culture and so on. That's one movement. And the other movement was the Islamist movement that focused on another pan of that identity, which is the faith. These two movements had popular support. I'm not sure that any other movement has popular support. I'm not sure that if you were to have a discussion, a free discussion, without government agents around, with a Syrian citizen, I'm not so sure that they'll define themselves as Syrian, first and foremost. Of course, they're citizens of Syria, the state called Syria. But what is their, overriding identity? The main identity? I would suggest that you hear, well, man, I'm Syrian, but I'm Kurdish. That's my main identity. I'm Syrian, but I'm an Alawite. That is my main identity, You remember taking part in the suffering and triumphs of other people that you even don't know? So, would they take part in the suffering and triumphs of any other Syrian, even a supporter of Mr. Assad? Or would they take part in the suffering and triumphs of their fellow Alawites and fellow Kurds and so on? Because that is identity. Okay? And so, I think one of the problems in Syria is not necessarily, obviously, resistance to the oppression of Assad and so on and so forth. But the oppression of Assad, let's remember that Assad is not merely a dictator. He is a dictator that comes from a particular sect, religious sect. And the fact that he was so resented is not because he's just a dictator, but he's also a dictator that doesn't speak to my identity. He is kind of a foreigner that rules over me. People don't like that. Would you like to be ruled by foreigners? Who likes that?
Jordania.
Yeah, so that's... Sorry, I know I give long answers to short questions, but I'm quite passionate about it, and I hope you appreciate it. Any other? We still have time. Any other? Yes, please.
I have heard by the Arab politicians that they want to destroy Israel. I know that that's good for them from a political point of view because they get support and they forget some of the programs. Do the citizens of those countries really believe that? Is that an important thing in the way of solving the problem? Like zero state, disappearing Israel, that won't solve anything. They start killing themselves again.
I think I'd like to answer that. How am I supposed to know that? How is any of us supposed to know what people who are not free to express their true opinions, how do they think? I mean, you know, they don't have elections, and when they have elections, they are formal elections that are won by 95% of the vote, okay, by the obvious person. So how do we know what they think? And something else, we all, you know, in order for us to form sensible opinions, not just the Arabs, but any of us, in order to have sensible opinions, we need information. Do they get information? A lot of them don't speak English because the education in many of these countries is poor. It's underfunded, low quality, because the government doesn't focus on education. Okay? So, where am I going to get this information that contradicts the official line of the government? I don't know where it comes from. So we know that the Arab rulers tend to incite against Israel because, let's face it, for a dictator, having an external enemy is an excellent thing. It's a fantastic thing. It's a godsend. You know, an external. Anything that is wrong can be blamed on that external enemy. Okay, and also any pressures that built up among the people can be hopefully channeled that way, and not to the throne that's under my tuchas, okay, my own tuchas. So it's an excellent thing. So they use that. They've been using this forever. And Israel is an excellent scapegoat for these rulers. The people can only act on the information they are given.